After watching a couple of heist movies, I wanted to make a realistic series of steps on the ways to break into high-level facilities, like a museum, as depicted in these films and shows. This is for fun though, so I'm not saying you should try and break into any private or government property. And before I begin, if you like this type of content and want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe. I would roughly guess that a heist would take anywhere from a couple of months to a couple of years, mainly on the planning aspect due to the specifics of the building and the people inside of it. So your first step would be to research the building you want to rob. In my example, it's a museum. You want to find pictures, its history, along with what item or items that's inside that you want to take. I'd recommend trying to obtain schematics, which are simplified diagrams of the building, and or blueprints. Either of the two can have a plethora of info, but it will be incomplete for your specific purpose. Now, because museums are heavy in foot traffic compared to something like a bank vault, you have the ability to do some reconnaissance of the facility you're trying to hit up. You'd want to dress inconspicuously, preferably with a mask and a baseball cap to cover your face, along with items like clothing that have no identifiable logos and are in darker colors. You'd want to attach 1 to 2 spy cameras on your body to record the entire area, so you can review the footage to get even more comfortable with the building, as you want it to be like you've lived there for the last 10 years. In my opinion, I think one camera should be eye level, probably on some fake glasses, and another one at an unusual spot for recording up above and down below, where they usually hide cameras and other sensors. You should record anything, including the cameras, that looks like a security device, even if it is a fire alarm or a smoke detector, because you can never be too sure. This info can be very valuable as it can give you a rough estimate on the amount of security devices inside the facility, and clear pictures will allow you to reverse image search them, or just describe them on Google to see and find the exact match. And the reason why you want to do this is because you can look for any production flaws, or what kind of camera or what kind of sensor it is. Understand that when doing such recon, you'd want to stretch it between a total of a couple of days to even a couple of months, so you can get acclimated without being suspicious. And while you do your recon, it might be useful, though risky, to set off one of the alarms. Now of course, if you do it, you may get flagged, but by pushing somebody into a painting or portrait and seeing how they react. Do alarms ring? Do guards appear? Does a gate come down sealing the area off? All this is very valuable information. Now if you were to do this at nighttime, it could be a little different because during working hours, they'll most likely lax the security because of the number of people there. But at dark, it can be different, so the security could be boosted up. Which is why you want to take a couple of days to a couple of months doing this reconnaissance, so you can also learn the shift schedules of the guards, when the museum opens and closes, any days where the security is boosted due to an event, or lax because of an event, along with what days are closed, like holidays. And this can help you decide whether you want to break in during the morning or at night. Each have their pros and each have their cons. Thanks to the information from the reconnaissance, the next step is to buy tools and materials necessary for the job. The first thing to buy is a fresh pair of clothing and shoes, so you don't track in any DNA that could be associated with you. And again, just like before, no logos, no symbols, darker colors to blend into the night, like navy blue. Make sure the shoes and clothing are sealed in a bag, like plastic bags, to avoid any unnecessary contaminants. If you have long hair, I would recommend cutting it, or at the very least, wearing a hat to seal in any unwanted drops. And before you go, make sure to take a rigorous shower to remove any particles that may be on you. Other items needed for the job could include lockpicks, acetylene torches, weapons, duct tape, flashlights, and whatever else needs to beat the security system and the people there. You should also be adept in lying and conning, as social engineering can help one skip many barriers of entry. For example, the halo effect, where the tendency for a positive impression in one area tends to transfer to positively affect other areas. For example, I think when people wear a construction uniform, the halo effect is in play. Many people just assume work is being done instead of questioning their legitimacy. If you ever seen the TikToks where the guys are carrying the ladders into like different fucking businesses, you know what I'm talking about. Similarly, wearing a police uniform can give a level of authority that's usually unquestioned. This is exactly how the famous Gardner Museum heist began, where the criminals wore police uniforms and coerced themselves inside before tying up the security guards. With the tools ready, you want to start formulating a plan. Make sure you know every single route, every single exit and entrance, every fucking window there is, fire alarm, where each camera is, like the back of your hand. And then you could choose to use different methods for the plan. You could use brute force, or use lies and deceit, or a combination of both. Now understand, the way you choose the route for the plan can increase your charges if you are caught. For example, the story of the roof man was charged with kidnapping as he moved the people from McDonald's into the freezer against their will. So, if you turn to attack somebody and they die, you may be charged with like 2nd or 3rd degree murder, so be careful. Now, here are some classic examples of security used in a lot of movies and shows, and probably in a lot of real life situations, and some ways to beat them. Number 1, lasers, which seem to be real for security, but just not how it's depicted in movies. I couldn't find definite proof that facilities with valuables use them for sure, but there's a high chance that they do, considering there's many YouTube videos on making a DIY laser tripwire. Among other things, 3 main components include a power supply, a laser medium, which indicates the specific wavelength of the laser, and an optical resonator, which are mirrors that concentrate light. Now, I couldn't find the exact wavelength that the lasers use, but there's a high chance it will be invisible, as light runs on a wide spectrum, but the human eye can only see a finite amount of it. And so depending on what the laser is, there's a high chance it might be infrared, but it could be something else as well. But using a spray to see the lasers is inefficient, as it can quickly dissipate, makes noise, and you may inhale the substance which can be toxic, or at least an irritant, causing noises like coughing. If it is infrared, using infrared goggles or an infrared camera may show the visible lines that you can't see normally. The riskier approach to beating this system is to actually go through it while it's active. You need to keep the goggles on and do months of training to be comfortable with the movements. I would recommend a strict series of yoga, Pilates, and gymnastics, all exercises that require you to be very flexible and have a lot of body control to easily move between the lines. Now, preferably, if you are to do this method, I recommend getting a picture of the laser grid system and then setting up in a similar sized room numerous wires to mimic the direction and angle of the lasers. I would also electrify said wires to give you feedback if you fuck up. The safer approach would be to try and find its power supply and then cut it, as it's hard to go the same way back with the stolen item if there's a laser grid there, changing your whole body's dynamic. Next is motion sensors. Now I can see that there's 2 types of commonly used motion sensors: passive infrared and microwave motion sensors. The microwave sensors work like a bat by sending out microwave pulses and measures the reflections of a moving object. These are vulnerable to electrical interference though, which confuses it, so that's one way to beat it. The second is passive infrared, which detects a rapid increase in temperature and if an object blocks too many grids that's being covered. One option could be to cool the room to lower the overall temperature so that it doesn't see a spike when you walk in with your body heat. And the other way is to try and blind it or slow its reaction time with an infrared illuminator, though the specifics is dependent on the make and model of which sensors the museum uses. The best option would be to buy the same type and test it for yourself. Next, guards. Now, dependent on the amount of valuables in the museum, there could be many or little guards. They usually rotate in shifts and are usually watching the cameras in either a room or at the front desk. Now, the way to take out the guards, you can use brute force by hitting them in the head. Understanding that though, being unconscious has its own risks, like permanent brain damage or even death. You could also drug them, but that too comes with its own set of risks, as without knowing their medical history and genetic background, they could have an unwanted reaction. Next is a CCTV camera. CCTV, or closed-circuit TV cameras, work at least having one camera, lens, monitor, and recorder, but there's usually more. And they work by taking constant sequence of images and videos that are transmitted by cable or wirelessly, depending on the chosen system, to the recording device and then on a display monitor. Depending on the type of camera used, they can also have the ability to zoom in and rotate at a 360-degree area. There are usually two types, wired and wireless, and are most likely backed up onto a hard drive. You'd want to avoid the cameras seeing you by using its blind spots until you reached the security room, as if they do see you before you get there, they may radio in someone. Now, if it's impossible to get through the blind spots due to the intricacies of how it's set up, you could try and cut its wires or block the wireless ones with a jammer. Now, it seems jammers are kind of illegal if they interfere with mobile and GPS, personal communication services, wireless networking services, and police radar because of the safety risks that it can create. But you're committing a crime, allegedly. So, if you can get one, you should. The jammer can also help you create an alternative problem for the security where they'll get up and not be suspicious but think more likely the Wi-Fi is out. Then you can jump them. Similarly, an EMP device, which is an electromagnetic pulse. There are many instructions on the internet on how to make them, albeit in a smaller capacity. It should be not too difficult if you understand the process to make it slightly bigger, and if made well, it could potentially work on all the electronic security devices that I mentioned previously, as long as it does not have a shielding. Now that you bypass the security, the next step is to physically take it out of its case and take it out of the building. But the issue is the item that you want could have different dimensions. For example, if you wanted a portrait or some sort of famous painting, I wouldn't recommend cutting it out as it could damage the value. So it would be better to remove it completely and then remove it from its frame if possible. You would also require something to hold the items in to protect it from the external elements and the movement while you run away with it. Now, if and when something does go wrong, make sure you stay cool and collected. Cracking under pressure, especially in a high-risk scenario, could be an absolute death sentence, both figuratively and literally. Make sure to stay calm and always start to adapt, so if one exit closes, find the next one. If you successfully escape the building, you immediately want to leave the premises as soon as possible, even if you left something in there. It's not worth going back. The best option from there is to move to a foreign country without any extradition treaties to your original country. Like maybe, I don't know, Switzerland, and then lay low for a while. Because you can't sell it, especially if it's a very famous piece or item. Like you stole the Mona Lisa, you kinda getting fucked for a couple of years. But it also creates opportunities, as many collectors that wanted it, but couldn't because it's a priceless treasure, may pay top dollar to purchase it off of you. Of course, you have to be careful that they're not actually undercover agents or cops. And worst comes to worst, you may even be able to get immunity, depending on the circumstances, if you return the item, if it's really that serious. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.